The Cleveland Browns are 3-6 and are most recently coming off of a 39-17 loss to the Miami Dolphins in a game where Tua Tagovailoa threw for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the Dolphins as a team ran for a $195 and 2 touchdowns on nearly 6 yards per carry. Miami had nearly 500 yards of offense, and the only time the Browns got off the field in this game was when they made a stop on 4th down, which was on their own 14-yard line, and when backup Skylar Thompson kneeled the ball to end the game. They forced 0 punts for Miami, and not surprisingly, Jacoby Brissett could not keep up with the Mike McDaniels-led Dolphins, and the Browns are in serious trouble moving forward. In today's video, we're going to discuss why they're in trouble, how they got here, and realistically what the steps are moving forward, because this is an ugly situation at the moment, and there is a lot to discuss in today's video, and I mean a lot, because it goes back a couple of years, and without further ado, let's begin. Just a few short years ago, the Cleveland Browns were set up to have a bright future. Not the team of the future or the team that's going to be a rival with the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes for the next 7 to 8 years, but a bright future. In 2020, they had a rookie head coach in Kevin Stefanski lead them to 11 wins and not only a playoff appearance, but their first playoff win since 1994 when Bill Belichick was their head coach. Then Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield played well in 2020 down the stretch and looked to be their guy for the foreseeable future. After getting beat in Pittsburgh 38-7 early in the year in a game where Minkah Fitzpatrick had a pick six, Baker Mayfield and the Browns responded by finishing the year 7-3, and Baker himself had a very good 16-2 TD to INT ratio during this stretch. They were playing winning football. They ran the ball well with both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt behind a big bruising offensive line led by Joel Bitonio, J.C. Tretter, and Wyatt Teller. Eventually, they won a playoff game against Big Brother in Pittsburgh with a score of 48-37 and a game the Browns were up 35-10 at half. They let all the frustration over the course of 20 years in one half, and by playing good defense, running the ball, and not turning the ball over, this looked to be their key to making a deep postseason run, or at least have the possibility of making a deep postseason run every year. And as we know, things don't always go according to plan in the NFL. There's a reason it is an ever-changing league. They lost the following week in Kansas City in the divisional round of the playoffs, and there's no shame losing in KC in January. In fact, the Browns nearly won that game, but it has been truly downhill for this franchise since. 2021 was supposed to be a year they built on this success, but it was a disappointing end to the season after they started out 3-1. And another team from the AFC North stole their shine and made a Super Bowl appearance. They were 7-6 with 4 games to play, this is Cleveland that is, and had a chance to get back to the postseason. They lost the ensuing 3 games in which Nick Mullins played a home game against the Raiders, and Baker Mayfield threw 6 interceptions in the next 2 games, which knocked them out of the playoffs. It was no secret Baker Mayfield was playing hurt, which you can respect to a degree because he wanted to be out there for his guys, for his city, and for his franchise, but in a 2-game span where you need wins in the worst way, completing just 50% of your passes and throwing 6 interceptions in 2 games does not help the team, and in some ways, this sealed Baker's fate. And entering the 2022 offseason, the Browns had to do something at the quarterback position. A lot of the fan base had turned on Baker Mayfield, and something had to be done. They then made a controversial decision to trade for Deshaun Watson while still having Baker Mayfield on the roster, which in turn deflated Mayfield's trade value because they were never going to play Baker over Deshaun, no matter how good Baker would have played during the time Watson was going to be out. And because the Browns went all in for Deshaun Watson, they have to win now. And we're seeing the drawbacks of going all in at the moment from teams like the Browns and like the Saints, who are both out of playoff contention with not a lot to look forward to at the moment. When going all in, this is where players need to step up, and the defense specifically needs to step up, and they haven't. Cleveland is a 3-16 with a few big losses, yes, but a few losses early in the year that will most definitely come back and bite them in the ass. They lost 31-30 to the Jets back in Week 2 when Joe Flacco led a game-winning drive against them, and they lost to Atlanta by 2 points with a score of 30-28. They also lost to Baltimore in a game they very easily could have won with a score of 23-20. Within the Baltimore game, they held Lamar Jackson to 120 passing yards on just 9 completions, and fantasy players will specifically remember this game because this was the game Mark Andrews had 0 catches. Near the end of the game, the Browns had a chance for Cade York to tie the game with what would have been a 55-yard field goal, only to commit a false start and make this a 60-yard field goal. The chance of Cade hitting a 60-yarder significantly lowered, and not surprisingly, the Browns ended up losing this game. From 2020 to now, a lot of things have gone downhill, and one of them, unfortunately, is the play of left tackle Jedrick Wills. And before I share some stats about Jedrick, this isn't this whole thing is Jedrick's fault, because it's not. There's a ton of rotating pieces that play into this. But from a once promising left tackle who had a good rookie season in 2020, he has not been the same player since. After the 2020 rookie season, you could have argued a Pro Bowl or even 2 were in his future if everything went right. However, in 2021, he allowed 8 more pressures than he did in 2020, despite having 108 less pass blocking snaps. This is per PFF, and in 2022 has 4 more pressures allowed than he did in his entire rookie season, despite having over 200 less pass blocking snaps recorded. And when people think of the Cleveland Browns, they of course think of trading 3 first-round picks and some change for a player who hasn't played since 2020 in Deshaun Watson, but there's a lot more than just that trade. Jedrick is only 23 years old, and the decision on his 5th-year option will come at the end of this year. And I think the Browns are going to be almost handcuffed into picking up his option, and not necessarily to work out a long-term deal, but to at least have him be the guy at left tackle for next year and even 2024 as well, because they don't have the draft capital to spend on a left tackle. And for all the faults Jedrick has, his position is a premium, and you almost have to hope your draft pick on your tackle hits, like a Tristan Wirfs, like a Christian Darrisaw, or like a Rashawn Slater. So for the problems the Browns have, it does not get better up front, and Jedrick Wills is a liability at best at the moment. The reason, by the way, for picking up his option and playing him next year is, who would the Browns realistically get that's better at this point in time without a first-round pick, and then what would they do with Jedrick? They would have to bench him, and it would be, in a lot of ways, a situation similar to Baker Mayfield, where if you would trade him, it would be at a discount because other teams know they're not playing him, and he would probably be pissed off on top of it. And the problems aren't just on the offensive line either. They've given up 15 rushing touchdowns in 2022, which is tied for second in the league with the Lions and better than only the Houston Texans, and give up an average of 4.8 yards per carry, which is tied for 6th most in the NFL. They've only forced 8 turnovers in 9 games, which is tied for 4th fewest in the NFL with several teams, including both the Dolphins and Chiefs, but there's quite a difference between these franchises, and it shows week in and week out. At the moment, they've given up 238 points in 9 games, which is 9th in overall points given up. However, 7 of the 8 teams ahead of them have played 10 games to Cleveland's 9. So Cleveland is giving up more points per game than a lot of these teams, and their points per game defense is actually the 2nd worst in the NFL, ahead of only Detroit. Their defense, in a lot of ways, is Myles Garrett and everyone else. And what will be brought up at one point or another is, should they trade Myles to recuperate some of the draft capital lost from the Deshaun trade? Because this idea that Deshaun Watson is going to come back and make this team a legitimate contender is a little ridiculous, because there are so many things wrong with this team. Deshaun doesn't play left tackle. He's not blocking for himself. He's not catching passes. He's not making tackles on defense, and he's certainly not stopping the run. And this is all banking on a quarterback that hasn't played in nearly 2 full seasons. And the Browns do not have a first-round pick until 2025. As I record this, Houston is selecting first with their pick, and with the Browns pick 9th overall. And whether that player would be a defensive lineman or a receiver or anywhere else, it would be critical to the Browns' 2023 success and beyond. But this team, to me, in a lot of ways, is going to be average and not be able to compete with the Chiefs and everyone else in the conference, because they are missing so many pieces on this roster at this point in time. They're not a quarterback away from competing, and that's a big reason why I titled this video, "The Cleveland Browns Are in Serious Trouble," because they are going to be in a spot where franchises don't ever want to be, and that's continuously treading water, and they're in a very tough situation to get this mess figured out. And I can't wait to see how they attack everything moving forward. And that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.